This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Nerding Out on Neurodiversity, the podcast for all things neurodivergence. I'm Dr. Matt Zakreski, clinical psychologist and professional speaker, and I'm happy to be your host through the wild trails of the neurodivergent world.
And I'm Jake Noonan, educational coach and humanities teacher, your co-host and producer, and I'm thrilled to help share the stories and the experiences of wonderful people in the world of neurodiversity.
We're really excited for today's guest, which we are going to say a lot because we're always really excited about every guest we get. So let's get into it. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Nerding Out on Neurodiversity. I'm your host, Dr. Matt Zakreski, clinical psychologist, professional speaker, podcast host, published author, wearer of many hats. With me, as always, is the Skeeter Valentine to my Doug Funny, Mr. Jake Noonan. Say hi, Jake.
Hey, everybody. Great to be here, as always. I love that you went back to the Doug Funny one, but this time, instead of pork chop, it was Skeeter. I'm here for it.
It was a better reference, right? I just like I didn't love the way the last one landed, so I was like, let me try it again.
That's perfectly fair. I'm excited for you to find like those real deep cut ones.
Oh, don't challenge me.
I'm challenging you. Here it is.
Like, are we talking like the Tucker Foley to my Danny Phantom, or are we going deeper than that? Because like,
I mean, I do love Danny Phantom a lot, but let's go deeper too.
That theme song still slaps. I don't care what anybody says.
Always.
And you know, it's a weird but perfect segue for our amazing guest today, Sheldon. Sheldon, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the obscure pop culture stuff we're talking about right now. Do you know Doug, the TV show Doug?
Yes, and actually, for the record, I have a episode of my own podcast in queue that is related to Doug because there's an episode that I didn't remember where Skeeter was identified gifted.
Huh?
Really?
Yes.
What?
Yes.
I didn't even
See?
Oh, I have to go back and watch that.
Yeah, that's news to me.
Yes. See?
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because also like
Yes.
Like I grew up in Northeast Philly, so I was one of the few white kids in my school growing up in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
So Skeeter always, like, to me, was an amazing character.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing that he was identified as gifted is giving so much depth to why I liked him too.
Yeah, there's yeah. So anyway, the Doug, definitely. I'm with you.
So this is the question, because this came up on a Comic-Con panel I sat on a couple years ago, but we didn't actually get to answer the question.
Mm-hmm.
So Sheldon, is Skeeter black?
Okay.
Because he's obviously in the show, he's teal. Like, we're just going to lay that out there. But like,
Right. So I love this question because this is definitely actually with a Black gifted group. I've had this discussion.
but see, I knew you were the guy to ask. This is great.
Yes. Officially, no, right? What I would say is that particularly for that era, Skeeter is coded black. But what I do love about it is that they didn't turn the dial all the way up, as it were, right? And so it allowed Skeeter to also exist, as you said, as teal, right? But I do think, again, if you look at how he's drawn and all that fun stuff, right, for the era, there was a nod to him being the black character, right? But what I will say in addition to that is that the Black gifted group that I was speaking with, a few of them had never considered that Skeeter was black. So that to me was interesting. But again, I think it speaks to this thing that many of us were just watching it as a show. I think, again, that also speaks to why it was beloved as well.
Tomorrow night, I'm doing a comedy lecture in Philly, and we're going to talk about, like, what does your fandom say about you? And it's all about, like, our brains seek connection, right? Our brains seek people who are like us. And so, I super identify with Doug Funny because I was the head in the clouds daydreamer cartoonist who had the crush on the girl next door. Definitely was too nice to everybody, but also couldn't get out of his own way.
Right.
So I would watch Doug and be like, soon I will learn how to have friends because this cartoon will teach me.
Right. Yes. Yeah. No, again, there's lots of things I love about Doug. And I found the episode because I've just been rewatching, which is a part of just sort of my general nature of staying connected to joy and staying connected to whimsicalness and staying connected to just old stuff that, this nostalgia of things, right? And so as I'm rewatching, I happened upon an episode and I was like, hold on, what's this here? But again, there's definitely things about Doug that also resonate with me. Definitely the head in the clouds, like, okay, I'm in class, but I'm not really in class, so.
Only I had a super smart talking dog. That's just us.
Yeah, right.
We don't get to have everything, right? That's
right, exactly.
Oh man. Well, we cannonballed right into our topics today. And Sheldon, I didn't even give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. Do you mind telling our listeners who you are and what you do and why we think you're so awesome?
Sure. So my name is Sheldon Gay. I am working towards all of the hyphenates that Dr. Matt has, but yes, I am a podcaster and a public speaker. I have a podcast called I Must Be Buggin', where the buggin' is BUGN, as you may be able to see behind me, which stands for Black, Unidentified, Underrepresented, Gifted, and Otherwise Neurodivergent. And so all of my work is about, fundamentally it's about helping everybody love themselves better so that they can love others better, right? But in particular, my work is about bringing awareness to the Black, gifted, and otherwise neurodivergent experience, particularly because many of us end up being late identified, which comes with its own set of stories, right? Many of us are misdiagnosed, which come with its own set of stories. And then, the general nature of being at the center of many of these systems of oppression, right? That brings a different flavor and experience to what is already a marginalized identity, neurodivergence, right? And so that's what my work is about, again, bringing awareness to those of us, like I said, that kind of fall into that category.
There's a lot, and that's why I think the work you do is so important. As I often say, as the whitest guy in the universe, at some fundamental level, teachers expect kids in the gifted program to look like me. A very, precocious little white boy from an affluent suburb who totters in I know all the state capitals. Please give me more math.
Right.
And they're like, yes, you'll be a senator someday. And I'm like, hooray for me.
Right.
Early in my career, I was doing some consulting for a school in Chester, Pennsylvania, right? One of the poorest communities in the country. And, they were like, we're pretty sure we have a gifted kid. So I came in, I did a classroom observation. I was like, yeah, I think she's gifted. I think she's definitely got that, that sharpness to her. And then as I was getting ready to leave the room, I saw feet sticking out from under a desk. And I stopped and I looked down and there was a kid laying on his back doing his history test on the underside of his seat.
Oh, shoot.
And I was like, I also got this kid. And they were like, why?
I was about to say, right?
I was like, because trust me, this is a kid who is creating challenges. This is a kid who's playing Madden left-handed with one eye closed. He's tired of beating the game. Let's challenge this. So and her IQ was in the 130s. She's definitely gifted. His IQ was 157. And I remember thinking to myself, this is a kid who would have fallen through the cracks.
Absolutely.
Because he's kind of a pain in the ass, right? That's when you don't feel like you fit, kids control what they can control. What can they control? Their behavior. A lot of the work I do, is if I can use my privilege to open some eyes, hearts and minds to giftedness doesn't always look like one thing because it isn't one thing. And hopefully we can cast a wider net and we catch more people.
Yeah. No, I absolutely love this example for a number of different reasons and not to kind of get ahead of myself as it relates to this episode that I'm kind of still working on. But this is exactly why I was compelled to not just watch this episode and just be like, oh, I didn't realize that, but to really want to dig into it because as many of us know, Skeeter is, kind of kooky, And that's just his throughout the entire show. Like that's his thing. But in this episode, there was an opportunity for folks to see a different side. And again, without getting too much into it, like one of the challenges was Doug kind of pressing up against this. It was like, how are you this smart? Right. And again, if we kind of bring a little bit of this idea that to some extent, Skeeter was coded black, and again, some of these other layers, this is exactly, again, why I do the work that I do, because the ways in which neurodivergence broadly, but certainly giftedness shows up can certainly be overlooked depending on how someone is presenting. And I know for me, a big part of my journey as well, and why I didn't realize that I was gifted until my 40s, is because a lot of people saw what I was doing and, put a different label on it or kind of downplayed it, or again was where they didn't necessarily give me all the opportunities to say, hey, like you should be over here when you're, I even think about even grad school. It was one of the times that I realized at a deep level that when I'm in a classroom and I'm behaving in a certain way, it's because I'm bored, right? A lot of teachers thought it was disrespect or whatever, just trying to be disruptive. But it was, look, I've learned this already, or this concept is not particularly complex or deep enough for me. And so I need to have something to occupy that other piece in my brain that you're not tantalizing right now.
Oh, that hits so much for me growing up too. I feel like if you and I were in the same school together and the same age, like we'd be really close friends.
Yeah.
Like, because I remember growing up being in the gifted program from like kindergarten on.
Mm.
And I've talked about it on here before, but like all the kids around me were white. There was no black kids.
Mm.
And I'm in the inner city Philadelphia school district.
Right.
So like you'd think that there'd be like more black kids in that kind of school.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of my close friends were like non-white.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing how those were the kids that were getting like ostracized and getting blamed for things, but all of the kids I hung out with were the smartest kids in the grade.
Mm-hmm.
They just
Mm-hmm.
didn't portray it in an academic setting because they were bored. And that boredom comes into like acting out. And the acting out is like, they're just a bad student. They just
Yes.
don't care. They're not able to do it. And then they fall through the cracks. Now you're not understood as gifted. And then you're screwed over in a sense for the rest of your academic career. So, ugh.
Yeah. There's data that I don't have necessarily right in front of me, but I'm doing a talk at the same conference end of July. And one of the things that I've included in there is these data that talk about, one, the disproportionate amount in which Black students are referred for, basically, being problem children in schools, right? For those kinds of services, right? Again, even some of the same behaviors that are now, you're saying people are getting curious about them. Okay, little Matt, like, little Jake, like, tell me a little bit more about what's going on here. Oh, you know what? Like, we need to be putting you over here, as opposed to being like, as you said, I think one of the things we've talked about a little bit as well is me as a Black boy, it's not just that the class itself is bored or doesn't necessarily fit my style of thinking. I'm in an environment altogether, particularly for me, I went to predominantly white schools, right? So there's a lot of stuff that I'm carrying there that I just don't feel at home with. And so I'm carrying a lot of that extra stuff to wanting to feel like this doesn't fit. I need to create my own space. And for an environment that doesn't see me as, or see the way that I am as normal for them, it seems problematic. And so it's like, okay, how do we get you back on track? As opposed to, oh, wait, we shouldn't be putting you, quote unquote, back on track. What we should be doing is investigating what's going on with you, because there's an opportunity for you to be doing some really exciting things and showing up better and feeling more part of this community and all the things, right, that you may say that you would want. But yeah, I mean, again, that's a perfect example, right? Like there are lots of schools like that where there are lots of, melanated students, right? And all of a sudden you're looking at their percentages though of folks in the gifted program and you're like, this doesn't add up.
The math doesn't math.
Yeah, math's not mathing, right? So yeah, absolutely.
A couple of years ago, I got to talk to Philadelphia School District, and I don't remember how many kids they were serving at the time, right? But like, let's just say it was 100,000 kids.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, so, we know somewhere between 2 and 5% of the kids qualify for the gifted program, right? Which means you should have 2 to 5,000 kids in your gifted program. You have about 2,200.
Mm.
So if you should have closer to 4,000,
Mm-hmm.
who do you think the kids are that you're missing? And they tied themselves in knots.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Maybe kids missed the day of the testing. Yes, all of them. All 1,800
Yes.
motherfuckers.
Right.
Like just,
They didn't have breakfast that day.
Yeah, I like.
Right.
Well, there was an Eagles game.
Right.
Something about Wawa. You get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
I was like, guys, you're missing your melanated kids. I mean, I said black and brown, but I like your word better. And they got that white person defensive thing, right? And I was like, guys,
Mm.
I'm not trying to call anybody out here, right? Like I actually am trying to call you in
Mm-hmm.
because we know that psychologically speaking, kids who look different than you, right? Whether they're in a wheelchair or seeing eye dog or they have melanated skin or whatever that might be, they are much more likely to fall victim to fundamental attribution error, right? Which is where if I see your behavior as a reflection of who you are, Sheldon, rather as a reflection of the context you find yourself in. And I was like, and I think to an extent we are all guilty of this because the kid who doesn't look like you, who doesn't come from your neighborhood, who's acting up in class, you're gonna be like, that's a bad kid. But the kid who looks like you, who like lives down the block from you, like, well, I know his parents have been going through a lot.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, absolutely.
That opens one door or shuts another one, and that is a dangerous conversation to start having.
Yeah, no, I mean, so many different things. I mean, one of the things that I want to put out there is that, yes, first of all, I try to find opportunities, as you said, right, to call in rather than call out, or even as I say, right, to check in before you chuck out, right? And so I am reminded of this Bell Hooks quote, which essentially, if I'm, going to kind of summarize, right, it talks about the fact that we all have the capacity to dominate, and we all have the capacity to cause harm. And so again, no matter how many times, how many progressive groups that you're a part of, no matter how many quote unquote black friends you have and all the different kinds of things, like it's not necessarily about you being this overt racist, but it's about understanding that you have been raised in systems that may incline you to do things unconsciously or otherwise that are harmful. And that doesn't make you necessarily a bad person, but to refuse or be defensive about that, that's where the problem comes, because now we don't have a way to really have a discussion. And so I think it's super, super important for people from all backgrounds, right? Because, and again, not to kind of give away my entire SANG presentation, but one of the things I talk about in the presentation is how, one of the challenges for melanated and otherwise marginalized folks as we go and find gifted groups or find neurodivergent groups or find whatever, right? It's like, okay, now I'm in this neurodivergent group and there's a part of me that now feels at home. But, even if it's a black gifted group, let's say, I may find misogyny there, or I may find ableism there, right? And so we can't just get into these spaces and think that there's no, just because it's now this affinity group or whatever, that there's no opportunity for us to also still be utilizing tools of harm. And so I know that a lot of times, frankly, white folks have a lot of challenge with that because I guess maybe their minds go to the slave master, kind of thing. It's like, well, I'm not the slave master. And it's like, I mean, there's a long walk before you get there, but that doesn't mean that along the way that there's not an opportunity to know that we should be turning back, right? And so I definitely wanted to make sure that I mentioned that. But then as you mentioned, right, there's this overall idea of people not being aware that, again, there's just opportunities for improvement. Like, again, those students who were left out, like we have to figure out why these folks are being left out, right? And it's not just, like you said, a bad cheesesteak. Everybody had a bad cheesesteak that day, right? So
Impossible.
Right.
They got the whiz, not the prove. That's all.
Exactly. So anyway, but yeah, no, I'm on board with you about that. And I as always, I want to thank you for being someone who speaks up about that, because I've had experiences in my life where I've tried to advocate for folks in a similar way, again, regardless of whether their identity or the issue was about Blackness. Like it could be about any number of other things. I know I was in grad school and advocating for LGBTQ people who, that's not my identity, but there was a lot of pushback. And I think that it's important for those who look like you, as you say, right, the whitest guy, in the world, right, to be the ones delivering that message because it is received, not that it's automatically like digested, right, but that there's a difference in your voice being the one sharing that message.
Like to stay on the LGBTQ thing for a second, a few years ago, I was contracted to speak at a large gifted state conference in a pretty conservative state.
Mm.
And I told them as part of my contract, I wanted to give my gifted and LGBTQ talk. And I was ready for them to push back. And they were like, no, that's great. I'm like, oh, I sort of thought you would not be done with this.
Right.
And they're like, it'll ruffle some feathers. But they're like, in all honesty, people are going to hear that much more from you, a very cis presenting white dude, right? You have a beard, you have a doctorate, versus like, call to mind some cliched LGBTQ person, right? Purple hair, half buzz.
Right.
Ooh, I feel called out.
Yeah, gosh. I don't know where that example came from. They have a weird electronic drum kit and like 17 dogs running around. Bass guitar hanging on the wall like some sort of art installation. It's whack. Listeners, you can guess what Jake's room looks like now. But it's, to your point, it's like white people, I think, see racism as a duality. You're either not racist or you're some like snidely whiplash Ku Klux Klan, like black people can't vote.
Right.
But it's like, I know I am guilty of microaggressions and verbal. I tend to, my brain, like now I've worked hard on it, but like if I talk to a melanated person, like, oh, where'd you go to college? That's a pretty standard question for me. They're like, oh, I went to Hamilton or I went to Wesleyan. I'm like, that's a great school. Like, oh, it's a good school, man. Like, I was like, I'm giving you a gold star.
Right.
But like, since people are like, well, my intentions were good, so I can't be racist. It's like,
right.
When we do a thing, when we release something into the world, we lose control over its impact. I think that's one of the fundamental social skills things that we work on, both in my practice, we also talk about on this pod a lot. It's just that your intentions might be great. If it hurts the people you're trying to help, then the first question you have to ask is, what am I doing wrong?
No, I think this is a fantastic point, and it gets to this idea, right, of, because some of this stuff does become sort of gray area so far as, I think one of the reasons why it becomes a gray area or challenging is because so much of what at least Western society loves is this binary, right? And so again, you're either right or wrong. You either harmed or you didn't, or like, so when we try to frame things from an idea of community and care, where you're saying, okay, it may be true that I had no intent to harm, but if I'm centering the relationship as opposed to my ego or centering, again, this binary that I'm trying to avoid, I say to myself, okay, but I upset Dr. Matt. And so I can still acknowledge that and apologize and, again, center the relationship, right? As opposed, and I don't have to say, yeah, you know what? Like, because this hurts you, I must have intended to, like, I don't have to take on all of that. I can just say, look, I can understand why that would upset you, blah, 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 blah. Like, I can have a conversation that doesn't completely, it doesn't involve me putting my hands, say, okay, put the cuffs on me, bud. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't have to do that.
I think that's so important too, because like white people as a whole, and I will stereotype and put everybody into one category for a second. Sorry ahead of time, but I'm also like not sorry. But like with this group of people, like
we don't all love Nickelback, damn it. All right. Or Dave Matthews Band or ranch dressing. Leave us alone. Sorry.
I can't. I'm sorry. But the fact that like we struggle so much at putting ourselves second and understanding that there is a power dynamic and there is this historical power dynamic as well that still impacts people. Because like, yes, and I know my family's not really like white American. We're from other places. I don't even know where at this point, but like to compare that to knowing that like I'm white in America and then my whole family's been white for, X amount of years, and then comparing and contrasting it with like your experience where you, even if you came from like Canada, for instance, and this is you were just born in America, like cool, you're still impacted by all of the history of our country.
Absolutely.
And what we've done. And it's so important for the white people who are in the position of social power to acknowledge that and be okay being uncomfortable in knowing that and having those kind of conversations. So like, I just want to thank you for even just acknowledging that from your end too.
Hey, no. I think this is the work for me, right? Is about making us more comfortable with this discomfort. I think that's where the real progress can be made, is where we say, okay, again, I understand this is uncomfortable. I understand that there's no easy answer right here at the door. But like, if we just keep avoiding it, we're going to keep getting the same results, right? And so let's have at it. Let's put everything kind of like out there on the table. Again, this also now is reminding me of another Bell Hooks quote talking about beloved community, which is, essentially described as this place where we're not, in this, I don't see color, right? Or I don't see whatever, like insert identity. But no, that I see that, because for me to be able to truly experience you, I need to see those things. I need to know what that means for you. But if we get into this space where, again, any opportunity for harm or disrespect or offense is just too tough, it becomes a problem. But I think this also goes to why a big part of the work is about teaching people the skills of repair, right? And reconciliation. I don't think we do a great job of that, again, at least in Western society. I think, again, a lot of it is very, very punitive. And so people start to get worried about being punished for stuff, as opposed to saying, you know what, again, if I can acknowledge this, and there's still a path back to community, a path back to being whole, okay, then I'm okay with investigating even whether or not I did something wrong. Because again, sometimes you even realize, you might have the conversation to realize that's not even what someone said or whatever. I don't know, right? Like you might be like, okay, you know what? I was a little bit touchy today because of whatever, but you have to be able to honestly and humbly be able to have that conversation.
Speaking of, I have a question for you. Is that shirt a Malcolm X quote?
It absolutely is.
Oh, okay. Is. I was hoping so. And then when you started moving back a little bit and I saw more of it, I was like, that sounds so familiar.
There you go. We got Bell Hooks. We got Malcolm X. I mean, like,
I love Malcolm X.
Oh, yes.
That's like real quick. I was at a one of the No Kings protests in my family's area. It's like a white suburban place. I'm in Vermont right now, but that's outside of Philadelphia. And I remember talking with my mom's friend about all of these like cultural things for a second. And she was like, I don't think I have any, biases at all. I was like, are you sure? Because
where's the red flag now?
Exactly. I was like,
I was like, I'm going to ask you about this specific group and this specific person. And I want you to just like, no judgment. Just tell me the first thing that comes to mind. And it was like Malcolm X. And she was like, oh. I was like, okay. Black Panthers? She was like, ooh. And I was like, this is why we need to have those conversations.
Yes, absolutely. That's freaking hilarious, but also, I mean, not terribly surprising, right? Because it goes back to what I've been sharing, right? That there's a lot of folks who, again, just believe I'm not actually owning another person, or I'm not actually out here in the white hood, right? That means I'm in the clear, right? And it's like, but no. And I think one of the parts of it too is that too few of us investigate our thinking, and like, why do I believe that? Why do I feel so strongly? Why is it that this image, this person, this thought, this word, this whatever comes up, and I have such a strong reaction? I was talking to someone the other day, and I'll leave out as much detail as possible because I don't want this person to think that I content farm from my conversations. But I would just say that this person we were talking, having a brief conversation. We were talking about even why in a lot of Western countries, Jesus is depicted as a white guy, right? And I brought up the fact that, again, this fits the white supremacist model. And it was like, well, are you tell me more about them? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, I don't even like you can go do your own like basic investigation. Like that's not a super like large hurdle to clear to be able to see that that's true because particularly because this person was acknowledging that Jesus would have had to have been, a melanated person from, the Middle East or whatever, right? Like that would have just had to have been historically true. So it's like, okay, well, why would then all of these books and, pictures, why would he be a blonde-haired, blue-eyed character? Like, let's investigate that. So go ahead, Dr. Medley. I think you were going to say something.
I mean, the transformation of American Jesus
Mm,
is one of, I think, the most interesting cultural norms, certainly that I've seen in my lifetime. I mean, like we are talking a guy who, we know existed in the historical record, right? This isn't Santa Claus. Like this is a person we knew existed, and we knew what part of the country world he was from, and we know what people from that part of the world look like. We can make some reasonable assumptions.
hmm
And then like these days, like, Jesus is carrying an AR-15 and, drop
Right.
kicking, a colored person below the southern border. And it's just like,
Right.
and it gets to this idea that white supremacy to me is like high fructose corn syrup. Shit is in everything. And the more you start looking at it, the more you start finding it, the more you realize it's everywhere. It's so insidious. And it gives me this weird, like, sort of like double agent behind enemy lines mentality. Cause I'm like, I know I am still part of the problem in a lot of ways and like a lot of what I represent. But like, I'm also surrounded by people who are infinitely worse than me. Right. So it's just like, what does one do?
Yeah.
And I don't want to put you in the role of like, help us, Sheldon, save the white people.
Right.
Be our
No,
savior.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I think this kind of goes back to what I was even saying earlier about everyone realizing that there's this opportunity for domination, right? Because I think even there are Black people who don't realize the ways in which white supremacy has seeped into their thinking. And so for me, the solution at a high level, right, is really about one, the investigation of our thoughts, and two, facing the fact that it's the system. We have to figure out this, like focus on the system as opposed to individuals, right? Because at the end of the day, like if we look just for white people as the problem, then we miss a lot of ways in which, especially as we move into the future, right, where white supremacy is being codified literally, or has been codified literally. And so now it has no face, it has no racial or ethnic markers. Yet and still, the system itself is in place. And so if we don't figure out how to recognize when something is perpetuating harms that we are seeking to eliminate, then again, we kind of are in a losing battle. And so yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, there has to be first an acknowledgement that these systems are pervasive, that these systems are, they still exist. Again, for those who want to go to history, right? If facts and figures are your thing, right? You can look at, as soon as you eliminate Jim Crow, it's not as all of a sudden like the butterflies and, the rainbows started flying, that's not what happened, right? There are still people now who cannot move into certain neighborhoods, and it's not necessarily, again, there's not a law in place, but there are certainly systems. And so I think, again, it may also even be helpful. I mean, again, frankly, it's just like when I think about me being a Black feminist, I am not a woman. However, and I realize that in the system of patriarchy, that I hold a position that has at least some power, right? Not all of the power, but certainly some power. And to that end, me doing something to change it is about acknowledging that, yeah, like I do have some privilege. And so let me, one, leverage that to do something, but two, let me also investigate that to make sure that I am, as much as I can, rooting out the challenges that were instilled in me before I even knew what was going on, right? That feels so innate because again, they were instilled in me when I was, whatever, 1, 2 years old. Like that's when that stuff you start to realize, okay, what color is for boys, right? So anyway, yeah. Hopefully that's a somewhat of an answer, right?
And that reminds me a lot of when I taught in South Korea. Like this was a concept that was very much so on my mind when I was in South Korea. They're amazing people, but the country as a whole has been inundated with like American supremacy and white supremacy aspects of everything. So like culturally speaking, they also had like a history of like whiteness as not working, being, more wealthy and that kind of stuff. So it's combined with both of those. And teaching some of the classes there was only a handful of like non-white teachers there. And they were always getting bad looks, judgment and everything. And I remember running this one class with a bunch of, I want to say like 6th graders, 7th graders. And I realized that they had such a negative view towards anyone who wasn't white or Korean that they would audibly say something right when they saw pictures of someone. It's like, oh, ew, dirty, ugly, and that kind of stuff.
Wow. Yeah.
So one of the lessons I gave them was I made sure to show them a list of like 10 different white people, specifically like 10 different black people, and just focus on like making sure all of the black people were well-known, positive role models, and then all of the white people were like terrible people. And really threw it at them like, what do you guys think of these people first when you first see them? And then how would you rate them? Like, who's the best person to like the worst person based on your scale? And then let's learn about who these people are. And like each time they were like, how? I don't understand. Like, why is this person above that person? Then they started realizing that the top 10, because of how I organized it, was non-white people. And it just like blew their minds. And that kind of like microaggression where it's like, ew, ugly, kind of dissipated a little bit. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to like reflect that it's also like a global issue as well at this point.
Yeah, and I think thank you for sharing that. It's a fascinating story, but also speaks to the fact that colonialism is not done, and that it is again, it's moved. It's not the Mayflower or whatever, right? It's now we're colonizing more broadly minds and belief systems and social norms, which again brings us back to this work. Why, for me, this work is so important is because we can't afford to have neurodivergence and again all these other marginalized identities continue to be stamped upon, right? Like I think it's not just whatever the prototypical autistic little white boy that we say, oh yeah, let's advocate for them, blah blah blah. It's like no, like we need to make sure that all the reasons why someone who is autistic or has ADHD or whatever it is, right? It's important that we dismantle all these different things so that we can see the human there, right? Like, let's see the human and not all these other narratives that are playing in our mind, again, consciously or otherwise. And again, for those of us who are under so many layers of these systems, it's the toughest for us to be able to remove ourselves. We're just talking about, shoot, like all the backlash on a simple statement as Black Lives Matter.
Oh,
like,
man.
No.
not Black lives are better, not Black lives are the only ones that but just matter, right? And so, again, that to me is just, like I said, is indicative of the fact that we really have a lot of work still to do along the lines of honoring people's humanity.
Well, and I think this is where part of that giftedness piece plays directly into it. It's just that we have a strong sense of justice. We have that emotional intensity. Like, I remember reading a study where like really emotionally empathetic gifted kids read injustice as pain. Like their brain literally coded as pain. Like, you see, a homeless person that hurts you. Like that thing just comes with you, right? It's another crinkle in the piece of paper. And like, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing that many people are able to compartmentalize that stuff. we could do a whole other podcast episode about how I hear about unhealthy population in this country.
Yeah, right.
Suffice it to say, I think that lack of empathy is a piece of privilege. Not having to care buys you time and emotional space. You're not using your spoons on stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, again, so many angles to kind of twist this around and discuss it, but I think you're absolutely right. And honestly, I've been thinking about this a bit. Actually, give me 1 second. I'm gonna look up this. I just sent it to my friend. It's like another gifted friend because we were just talking about the challenges. So for the record, I'm borrowing this. This is a post from Intergifted, just so that I give credit to where credit's due. But it says the most profound intelligence isn't found in knowledge alone, but in the courage to love deeply despite knowing how fragile everything is. Right. And I love that because this person and I, we've been talking for the last couple of days about some of the deep challenges of being in community with people who just they don't feel as deeply as us. And so there's one factor where we always look like we're just being dramatic and all this other kind of stuff, but it's deeper than just whatever, some sort of opportunity to seek attention, right? Bids for attention. It's not that. It's, as you said, there's this level at which seeing other people suffering is painful. And we, again, on a fundamental level, as humans, are looking to avoid pain. We don't like that, right? And so how do we do that? How do we deal with that? And some people will disassociate, right? Some people will kind of like put up these blockers. But I do think that there's also something to be said for those for whom they can't see all of the details in the room, as it were. Like they can see the light, they see light in the dark, right? But they don't see the shadows, if that makes sense, right? They don't see those grays in there to see the details of what's there. It is a kind of privilege, because otherwise you can just say, oh, okay, this is just a yin and a yang cookie or whatever. I mean, whatever, black and white cookie. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's all there is here. And meanwhile, the rest of us, who have that depth and complexity, are looking at this and seeing, again, this goblin that's in there, right? Again, I said, I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing, because there are definitely days where I'm like, I wish that I could, close that part of my mind off. But I think what I've resolved myself to saying is, despite the extra weight that it can come with, that at the end of my journey, I can say that I knew this world in a way that few did, and that's what I can take from it, right? So,
well, Jake, I think I can speak for both of us that we could definitely talk to Sheldon forever and ever and ever.
Absolutely.
I mean, this could be the Lord of the Rings of podcast episodes. We're just gonna dismantle all of Western capitalist society and build it back up.
I am absolutely here for that.
Oh man. Well, so Sheldon, what we'll have to do is we'll have to have you back, if that's all right, my friend. Because,
yes,
we love talking to you, and you just, like you said, you've crafted a perspective and built yourself a platform that elevates your unique perspective and gives the community a voice that it has far too little of. So, it's an honor to share that journey with you, my friend.
Thank you.
We're going to shift into our wrap-up questions now.
Okay.
I'm going to start us off. So, Sheldon, if you could have any superhero on dial, who would it be and why?
So it's kind of going back to this nostalgia thing. My favorite super character of sorts is Super Grover. And I'd say Super Grover because, again, I think he combines the whimsicalness, the joy, he wasn't this sort of, curated Superman, right? He was Super Grover, a hero that you can laugh with and even laugh at, right? I think is worthy of having on a speed dial.
I love that. It's definitely the first Super Grover we've gotten. Like, as you said, I was like, I can't believe we haven't heard this one yet. And my kids are recently discovered there's a monster at the end of this book with Grover in it. Mm-hmm. So it's them most nights doing the Grover voice. It's funny that this conversation is happening right now, because Grover's been front of mind for me for the last couple of weeks. So that's awesome. I love that answer. All right, Jake, good luck topping that, dude.
I do not think that I can, to be honest, because Super Grover? Ooh.
All right. Good night, everybody. We're done.
It's just throwing me back to like my childhood. I'll try though. Oof. But my question for you is, what's your favorite word and why?
My favorite word. Huh. Dang. If I could hyphenate, I would say structured chaos. Because for me, that's kind of how I live, right? Like there are bounds. I need some structure. I need I need to kind of understand the space, but in that space, oh, let's have at it. Let's play. Let's twist things around, right? Like that for me is Sheldon. I think again, sometimes people see my structure and think that's all there is until a Super Grover pops out. And it's like, who is this guy? Right? So yeah, if I could hyphenate, and again, that's the giftedness, right? I'm always kind of like bending the rules a little bit. So
that's partly why we love ask those kind of questions, though.
Yeah, they're definitely a window into the soul.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very good thing. All right. Well, Sheldon, we're going to shut up for a minute and let you have the mic. What do you want our listeners to know? Like, what are your parting words?
Look, first of all, thank you so much for this opportunity to share space with you all. This is the highlight of my week, if I'm being honest. But what I want for the listeners to make sure that they take away is that we've got a lot of different ways in which we're trying to show up in the world, a lot of different goals that we have. We're trying to be in relationship with people in various ways, right? Friends, family, and otherwise. And a lot of times it's easy to focus that energy externally on how we can, get someone to behave the way that we want them to, get something to align with our goals, right? And all that fun stuff. But what I truly, truly encourage everyone to do is to look inside, is to love the inside, because I promise you, the more that you learn to love and truly to accept and to honor who you are and your humanity and all that it is, it will become infinitely easier to do that with others and to make peace with what shows up with others. The more that we see other people as mirrors to help us see, what's going on within us. And in turn, the more that we can act as a very clear mirror for other people, it will solve, like I said, a lot of the challenges that we're having. And so love yourself first and, go from there.
Couldn't ask for a better take-home message. So, well, Sheldon, it was a true pleasure. It was a privilege, honestly, to have you, and, go so far as to say that it's been the highlight of my week as well. So we'll definitely have you back, but, I know you're going to crush it at saying, your star is just going to keep rising, man, and because you deserve it and because the world needs your voice. So I look forward to buying tickets to that show. That's for sure.
Thank you.
So for all of us here at Nerding Out at Neurodiversity, thanks for joining us and learning with us today. We hope you took a lot away from this. I know I did. And thank you, as always, for trusting us with your time. That means the world to us. Jake, you want to send us out of here?
Absolutely. Great to be here as always. Take care, everybody. Thank you for listening. And Sheldon, what an absolute pleasure it was having you. Thank you so much for the conversation and just your intentionality behind talking about these things. So I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
We started with Skeeter Valentine, hit a little critical race there, and everything in between, yes. Right? It's just,
yes.
That is, for better or for worse, guys, that's our podcast ethos. Y'all want to keep listening or you're going to bounce, but that's, man.
Yeah.
So, all right, you guys, thanks. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Take care.
Nerding Out on Neurodiversity is brought to you by Dr. Matt Zakreski and the team at the Neurodiversity Collective. To learn more about the Neurodiversity Collective or to be a guest on the podcast, please visit our website at www.theneurodiversitycollective.com/podcast. Audio and production by Jake Noonan. Show your support by subscribing, leaving a 5-star review, and telling your friends about us. Our Instagram and social media handles are at #NoonPodcast, NOON podcast. Your support is appreciated and keeps us going. All discussions presented on this podcast are strictly for informational purposes, awareness, and understanding. The advice presented is not and should not be considered to be therapeutic in nature. If you have any mental health questions, please contact your provider. All rights reserved.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.